Hi everybody, how are you? Everybody still awake? Sort of, kind of. Okay, I'm going to start tonight with a really simple question that could get me shot in some other states. Who's the youngest person in this room right now? And this is kind of a rhetorical question because I actually met them last night. Where are they? I'm looking right at you right now. Would you mind standing up, young lady? Okay, everybody see her? Everybody see where she's sitting? I want you to go talk to her after I'm done tonight, and I want you to ask her if I was effective, because ultimately, thank you, you can sit down. Sorry to embarrass you like that. Ultimately, what we're measuring is what her generation thinks of what we're talking about. How we're gonna understand the way to be effective with this outdoor recreation economy and industry and community for driving what's next, not only in Colorado, but here in California and other states across the country. So I'm gonna share with you tonight the model that Colorado has used standing this office up, because I get that question a lot. Who the heck are you, and how the heck did you get that job? And ultimately what it really boils down to is coalition building. These are coalitions and communities that already exist in your community, but ultimately they're just not talking. So I want to share Colorado's journey a little bit tonight and ask you some really pointed questions ultimately that will hopefully answer what do you want to be when you grow up within the outdoor recreation industry. So, this is kind of my background. I'm a mountaineer by training, and depending on what year I was really working and where I was really doing it, it ultimately led me from Outward Bound to running my own organizational leadership development consulting firm to the director of operations for Adventure Consultants down in New Zealand. So if any of you have ever read the book Into Thin Air or seen the movie Everest, my job was getting Adventure Consultants back to being a global brand after our CEO was killed on Everest in 1996. So asking those questions, how do you not only create an industry all over from scratch, but if that industry falters and fails, what happens to the culture that surrounds it? Namely in Nepal, the Sherpa community around Everest. So these questions really weighed on my mind as my career kind of continued and evolved. And it wasn't just about going to the summits of these mountains all over the world for me. Ultimately, we started asking the question, how did these groups evolve? It wasn't just signing up with a company. Where did the gear that they were wearing come from? Where were they purchasing it? How were they training? What inspired them? All these questions kind of led me to ask a really straightforward question of the industry. What were we doing to take care of it? Both from a cultural perspective and an economic perspective, what were we doing to kind of drive that understanding of what was possible? And for me, it kind of did boil down to those lessons working for Outward Bound for a really long time, which is something that Kenji and I also share. That it's not just what you do for work, but it's also how you do it. And when I tell people all the time about the outdoor recreation economy, industry, and community, do you own a water bottle? Do you own a raincoat? Have you ever taken a hike, gone skiing, biking, boating, hunting, fishing? It doesn't matter what you do for work. If you have any of those things or access to any of those pieces, you're part of our economy and you're part of our community. It kind of changes the game, doesn't it? It kind of shifts the understanding of what's possible. And for me, working for Outward Bound, it was no different, but it still kind of feels like this, right? You're dragging a bunch of baggage around. Baggage that people have for years, the understanding of this is what's possible, this is how it's defined. Luis, that relationship with the Forest Service is never going to change. I'm never going to get permits. I can't start this company. There's not enough people. There's not enough money. There's not enough time. Historical conversations, right? And it does feel like that you're dragging people's literal and metaphorical baggage all over the world. That won't change. What can change, though, is how you approach that equation, and when you really recognize the power that you have as a community facing some of these concerns. So for Colorado, this office has been around for about 9 months, so my role is brand spanking new for the state. Utah has had this office for about 2 years. Washington State just hired their counterpart, my counterpart, about, I'd say, 3 months ago. Now there's other states that is looking at this office: Oregon, Montana, Wyoming, North Carolina, New Hampshire, really any state that has a portion of their economy driven by the outdoor recreation industry. So ultimately what we're saying at a state level is much like ag, tech, bio, tourism, advanced manufacturing. All we're asking for is proportional representation and focus at the state level. And our mission is pretty simple in Colorado: to champion industry, communities, and people to come to life through Colorado's great outdoors. Now, obviously, I'm Colorado-centric, but take out Colorado and put in California. Take out California and put it in Mammoth Lakes. Does it resonate? Does it make sense? Does it connect with what you try to do and how you try to do it within this community? That's the magic. That's the magic of raising all boats and understanding a little bit deeper of what's possible. So I just want to kind of throw out some statistics because I think they're somewhat important. This is our consumer spending in Colorado, a little over $34 billion, right? Pales in comparison to some of your numbers that we'll get into in a minute. Over 350,000 direct Colorado jobs, 994 million in state and local tax revenue, and 4.2 billion in wages and salaries. Seems like a lot of money, right? Seems like a fairly significant sector of the economy for the state. Now, that's not just one gigantic factory making backpacks or jackets, or one gigantic guide service taking people into the backcountry. It is a network of passion-driven communities, much like yours, making this work, adding those numbers up. Now, look at California. $85.4 billion in consumer spending. Now, we all know those pieces, right? 732,000 direct, not Colorado, that should be California. 6.7 billion in state and local tax revenue, and 27 billion in wages and salaries. I heard a statistic tonight that blew my mind. Anybody know how much Vons makes? Everybody knows this statistic? A lot of money, yeah. What was that one-day magic total within the Christmas holiday week? Was it like $1.2 million in one day?
December 27th.
December 27th, thank you.
All I want is 10% of that.
Right? And I think your Vons here is listed as one of the top 5 producing, revenue-generating Vons in the state. Now, you can say to yourself, well, yeah, it's everybody driving up from LA. Of course, they're going to be the only game in town, so they're going to drive that, right? That's the old baggage, dragging that around. Ultimately realizing, whoa, somebody's coming here for something. What's our role in that? How do we define that? How do we grow that? How do we measure that for us? What's our part of this? Because the definitions are changing, and they're changing really rapidly. So, we know some of these modalities, right? There's the rock climbing, there's the hunting, there's the rafting, and down here, this is a couple of buddies from a bluegrass band in Colorado, and they have this sign out front every time they play a gig. It says, "Wish you were here," right? Everybody wants a piece of what we have. It's regardless if it's in Colorado, California, it's that mountain-based economy, that health and wellness-based community that people really want to understand how to plug into. Now, I share this picture with you on the upper right because this is important as to how these definitions are changing. So I went to visit basically a summer camp, and this was located in Denver. And these kids go rock climbing, they do a bunch of different activities as a day camp in and around the Front Range in Colorado. And so I saw these kids circled up with PFDs on and paddles, and I thought of my own history learning how to paddle. I started looking around the water in the lake for that old beat-up aluminum Grumman canoe. Anybody else in here learn how to paddle in an old aluminum canoe? Right? So that's what I'm looking for, because that was my modality to learn how to paddle. And I went up to this group and I basically asked them, hey kids, where's your canoes? Are you guys excited to learn how to paddle? And this little Thundercat with the yellow cap turned on backwards, everybody see him in the right-hand corner? He looked me square in the eye and he said, canoe? I want to learn how to stand-up paddleboard because my dad stand-up paddleboards, and that's what I'm learning how to do. I'm learning how to sup. What's a canoe? Literally looked me in the face and said, what's a canoe? Am I a canoe? Pocahontas? No? Lewis and Clark? Read any book? Like that? No, I'm not learning how to canoe. I'm learning how to stand up paddleboard. Now, if I would have told you 5 or 6 years ago that you would be able to go to Costco or Sam's Club with $500 and buy an inflatable surfboard with a paddle, and without any swift water rescue, could go to any body of water, any place in California, and just tootle on down the river, you probably would have called me nuts, right? Guess what's possible now? You can go to Sam's Club or Costco and a couple of other specialty retailers, and for $500 to about $1,200, you can buy an inflatable surfboard and tootle on down a river without any swift water rescue training. Those definitions are rapidly evolving because we're a dynamic, innovative, driven, passionate community. So this is actually that kid's dad. So this is kind of a setup. His dad is actually a stand-up paddleboard guide on the upper Colorado, on the upper sea. So, you know, it's ultimately one of those things that not only can you buy these price point boards at a different level and engage in this new form of recreation, but people are now starting to explore yoga on stand-up paddleboards. Anybody in the room tried that before? Anybody have any comments on that, right? It's really easy, right? Yeah, not at all. Right? Now there are stand-up paddleboard fly fishing companies starting in Colorado where you can get a little exercise paddling instead of sitting in an oar boat and then start fishing right off the board. Companies are making boards bigger and wider and longer to accommodate that change in this modality of recreation. So, you know, ultimately we start to look at balancing a couple of tensions, not only in Colorado, but I think this is applicable here in California too. So, you know, how do you utilize and protect public lands and waters while sparking that sustainable economic development, right? You have to ask that question collectively as a community. What do you want that piece of pie to look like here? What's the responsibility of driving that innovation here? Because it's not just one crazy fella with an inflatable surfboard, right? You could easily have that old conversation and say, ooh, it's niche. There's not a lot of people coming. It's really nothing to focus on. But this is the way that community is showing up, at least in Colorado. It's massive. And so how do you take a part in that process? Because what we say all the time in Colorado is that you're going to have two choices. It's either going to be done to you or it's going to be done with you. The opportunity is ultimately yours to define what you want that intersection to look like. So the second tension balance that we really try to look at is how do you drive that innovation while cultivating that healthy outdoor lifestyle. Now, the second part we get, especially here, right? We understand what that magic is like to take a couple hours off and ski in the afternoon. I love the show of hands earlier, how many people actually skied today. That's great, and that's ubiquitous for any mountain-based economy or community. You get out there and you have a little bit of fun. But it's that innovation component. How do you cultivate and spark that? Because I bet you have somebody in your community that does stuff like this. Anybody know anybody like this here? Yeah? Call him out by name, John. That's me. Wow. So this person actually exists in Colorado. They're going to remain nameless because it's actually a buddy of mine. And we all know a person like this, right? They tinker around in their garage, and all of their friends say, oh yeah, they're definitely going to kill themselves. This is a really, really bad idea. And they tinker with a little bit of duct tape and baling wire. They put together a really simple equation that, you know, for this fella, it was a very simple question and problem that the bike that he had and the panniers that he had just wasn't enough to be able to commute to the grocery store, get what he needed, and bike home. So he stole a cart from City Market, which is kind of our version of Safeway, and went home and welded it to the front fork of an old bike. Now, in flip-flops, right? So you picked up on that, very good. So here's the tipping point, right? Now, in a small community, a recreation-driven community, somebody like this could be seen, and this is the normal baggage, it's just an oddity, right? There's crazy so-and-so doing something crazy again. But yet consider this for a moment. This person, if you have access to a little bit of capital and a focused community on, you know what? Maybe this is something that we should get behind. Maybe we could actually manufacture those things here. Maybe there's something to this. Maybe there's a market segment we haven't captured, and as a community, maybe we should focus on this. So this guy, because he was also a ski instructor in Colorado, had a couple of clients that he would just talk about this vision of having a bike with a lot bigger carrying capacity than anything he'd ever seen before, and it would just be so amazing. And these clients would come from all over the world to ski at this resort in Colorado, and a couple people who were long-term clients with him said, you know what, he's not crazy. There's something to this. We're gonna give you a little bit of seed money, cut you loose in your garage, let's see what you can do. He hired a couple of his friends, figured out how to find some manufacturing equipment, got some grants at the state level, and after about a year and a half, started asking this question. Where does innovation come from? Is it that guy or gal in the garage in a small community? I would reckon yes, because the ultimate result was that. This is a heavy suspension, fat bike, mountain bike, that he actually created to work with Volunteers for Outdoor Colorado to help with trail building. So note the combo chainsaw beard, chainsaw in the back, 6-pack on the front, with a glove pack in the middle. So that little crazy spark for the guy or gal in the garage, that's the piece of our $34 billion, sorry, in consumer spending in Colorado. And sometimes it shows up with an engine. Now, say what you will about the intersection between mountain biking and the OHV community. In Colorado, there's that historical baggage. The motorized community says we collect all of this revenue through our stickering process to help pay for conservation and stewardship. Mountain bikers, you don't do any of that. Now look at the emerging e-bike community. Anybody here heard of this or ridden one before? The battery-operated bikes. The lines between motorized and not motorized are blurring rapidly. And you have companies like Polaris, which are known to be making snowmobiles, and KHS, which is known to be making dirt bikes, that are making battery-operated full suspension mountain bikes, where you can turn the battery on, turn the battery off, use it when you want to assist getting you up the hill. So the lines between that old conversation and those old answers are rapidly blurring. It's either going to be done to you, or it's going to be done with you. So ultimately, what do you want to do in that process as a community? So, looking at that tension, you have to understand how to promote inclusive access for all and utilize what you have. I'm really grateful to your community over the past couple of days. You've taken me out and you've shown me a lot of amazing stuff. Went backcountry skiing with Nate and Dave and a couple of other folks here in the community. Went up to Telly Bowl and really talked about how do you create a sustainable recreation economy connected to what matters most for our community and allow people access to share the magic of what we have. Because ultimately, we're talking about understanding what your stewardship ethic is. How are you going to define that for yourself? Now, I know your mom works for IMBA, so that's a little different. But ultimately, you're going to have to discover that for yourself. And hopefully, through having these conversations, when we are dead and gone, you're going to understand how you want that to be impacted for your generation, which is ultimately the most important thing. So, you know what you're thinking. Half of this room right now is thinking, I have no idea what this guy from Colorado is about. That's a crazy picture. What's that about? The other half of the room is thinking, before I go car camping with 10 of my friends, I have to go to the hardware store and get a rake. Right? So Steve Jobs had this amazing quote that he would ask his employees at Apple all the time. And I think it really applies to the outdoor industry at a pretty deep level. He would say all the time, the ideas that you bring forward right now, in this moment, at this time, in this environment, could really be considered crazy. There's going to be people that are going to look at you and say, oh, that's crazy. That's too far, that's too much, we're not ready. All that baggage that you drag around, it just doesn't have a place. But consider this, in 5 years, in 10 years, are people going to look at that crazy idea in your community and say, wow, that's genius. I wish we would have thought of that. I wish we would have come together and figured this out way back then. That's the opportunity that's in front of you, understanding how to utilize this outdoor recreation economy. Because the definitions, again, they're rapidly shifting. Anybody here remember the mountain bike, the stump jumper? That was my first mountain bike. No suspension anywhere on that bike. Going for a mountain bike ride was an exercise in existential suffering, right? I felt like I needed dental surgery after every ride. It was awful. That's how I defined mountain biking. Now, the next generation is defining mountain biking by stuff like this, right? Pump tracks and vert parks that would scare the heck out of anybody that has never seen one of these things before. But there's actually a tourism-based economy attached to recreating in this way. Again, changing definitions, done to you or done with you. Consider the ski industry. So I know that you're considering some stuff like this up in Mammoth, and in Colorado, it's the same thing. Vail Resorts actually worked really hard to pass the summertime operations bill. This is an industry in Colorado that's over 50 years old, known for one thing and one thing only, right? Skiing. But did you know that in the terms of the lease with the Forest Service, this 99-year long-term lease with the Forest Service, snowboarding was actually illegal up to the point where the summertime operations bill was passed? Why? Because the lease was written before snowboarding existed. So consider that, and now consider the fact that through this passage of the Summertime Operations Bill, places like Vail, Breckenridge, other ski mountains that are on national forests can build these high challenge ropes courses that look like anything on an outward bound base camp, and these gigantic massive zip lines, these high angle canopy tours, 1,800 feet on Vail, from going to the top of the mountain to the bottom of the back bowls. It rivals anything you'd find in Costa Rica. And is this the ski industry now? Is this going to be part of building a year-round recreational economy? Those definitions are shifting. And it's shifting not necessarily because there's less snow on the mountains, but really understanding on how to capture an economy and a community to provide year-round work and a year-round recreation-based economy. All these pieces add up to the same picture and the same footprint of what's possible. So a couple of other Colorado facts, because I think they're important. Our population is going to add about 4 million people by 2040, getting up to about 7. And that statistic alone in Colorado is freaking people out all over the place. Where are they going to go? And it's already been understood that the saturation point in the urban corridors, that's going to happen well before 2040. So they're going to head to rural Colorado. They're going to head to towns just like Mammoth Lakes. So I think that's important because the challenges that we talk about in urban and rural areas, it's a challenge in resource management, but it's also an amazing opportunity to engage that next generation and start to talk about what's possible. Because over 80% of Coloradans participate in trail-related activities, and over 57% get on the water and recreate. So that's a pretty significant portion of the community, but now consider California. And I didn't just pull these out of thin air. 7 and 11 million people by 2025. 20 years less than the projections in Colorado, with a lot more people coming to your state. Now again, same challenges. We're talking about the same opportunity. And look at that statistic. Almost 60% of folks participate in trail-related activities. So if you've got that kind of influx of people with that kind of focus on outdoor recreation and the outdoor recreation economy, what's your story going to be? Not only for your town, but for your region. How are you going to stand up with that centralized voice and focus and figure out what's next? Now, I actually know there's some hard chargers in this room, so this might be kind of a rhetorical question. Can anybody ski up to something like this in the room and just say, I got it? Come on, be proud. There's somebody in this room. Right? It's somewhat tongue-in-cheek. It takes progression. Very few people can ski up to something like this and say, no problem. Dave, you could probably do this. I know you could probably handle this. But literally, this is one of those things that you have to find that path. You have to find the place that you want to start as a community to start chewing away at this thing. Now, has anybody in here done trail work before? Yes. Right? It's sweat equity. And oftentimes, I don't know about you, but what I've done on trails that I've worked on before, I go back to look at that water bar, I go back to look at that rock that I moved with 5 other people, and I'm proud of that work. That's a long-standing stewardship component that really ultimately defines my connection to the environment and that piece of land. So that path that you're creating as a community and as an industry, ultimately what we're talking about is defining how courageous you want to be in this space, what you want to do to actually drive this change. So, investing those resources towards workforce training while deepening those educational opportunities. I've talked a lot over the past couple days about how to engage your local community college, because this is something that we really focus on in rural Colorado, and understanding how the outdoor industry can help shape some of these things. You have an amazing opportunity with broadband and sort of that giga technology footprint that you have up here and that speed, where in Colorado we sort of face that same thing, that it's defining differently what that path is for education within the outdoor recreation industry. So for a long time, the definition for most traditional education has been, you gotta go get your 4 years, get advanced education, and then you can go do what you wanna do. But for the outdoor industry, you're driven by that passion point, you're guided towards a place and a sense of purpose, and then you kind of figure out how to put it all together. Colorado's no different, so I want to share with you a model that I think is important to consider. So Rifle, Colorado. Anybody here ever heard of that town? Small town, right? A little over 3,500 people. They have a small cut and sew facility there that basically is staffed by off-season river guides, ski guides, and people that work in the outdoor industry that are looking to build a trade. They want to learn how to do cut and sew manufacturing for outdoor apparel. But now you have companies like Vormi out of Pagosa Springs that have said out loud, we don't want to send all of our orders overseas. We want to focus on small batch manufacturing here in the state, here in Colorado. So the whole works, great cut and sew facility. We're going to send you some of our orders. Now Mountainsmith, a pack company in Golden, said, wow, that's a really cool idea, small batch manufacturing. We'll send you some of our orders. So now you've got people that are considered seasonal, part-time, off-season recreational workers that are learning a skill, filling a resume, doing cut and sew for iconic brands, and now you've got the local community college. We're having them partner, Colorado Mountain College, and look at a trade certificate for cut and sew. So you're building the whole ecosystem of what's possible. So looking at what's possible and engaging that workforce training and seeing it less as a seasonal cottage industry and more of, boy, if I love it here and I have a seasonal job, but I want to put a stake in the ground, start a family here, really engage in my community, imagine what's possible with that intersection. So that's something that we really look at and focus on in Colorado. Because this is what you don't want to do. I call the picture on the left Darwin's theory of natural selection. Can everybody see that? Right, this is not staged. I came across this many, many years ago, and I saved this picture. This is a couple of ding-dongs in an inflatable kiddie pool with the plug-in for the stereo being held up by a couple of floaty flip-flops. Right, something bad's gonna happen. Now, when you ask the crazy versus genius question, there are some things that aren't genius. They're crazy, and they're too far. You're pushing it a little too hard. But you have to have the community to be able to ask that question together collectively. You have to have that focus, because trying to be everything to everybody doesn't work. You have to understand really what you want to be in this space. And the last thing you want to do is read a book called Learning to Prioritize when the boat is sinking, when it's being done to you instead of with you. So the days of pointing at somebody else to figure this out for you are over. That population influx will be here whether you want it to be or not. People will be trying to figure out how to connect these dots with you or without you. So how you engage in this is really up to you. So I'm going to end with this story. And I think it hopefully holds a truth that it doesn't matter what state you come from or even what country you come from, because ultimately this is what defines what's most important. So anybody know this mountain? Yeah, that's Everest. So I've spent about a decade of my life working on this mountain. First time was guiding Eric Weinmeier, the blind climber, to his successful summit in 2001. And I've been back a lot of times to work with the Sherpas and the Sherpa community in mountains all over Nepal. And one of my very best friends is this guy. This is Basang Tenzing. He was with me on my first trip and was pretty much with me on every trip I took in Nepal, on Everest or any other peak that we were working on in Tibet or Nepal. And after every trip in Nepal, I'm really excited to go with him down to his village and visit this guy. This is his dad. I know he looks to be about 150 years old. We call him a gentleman of leisure because he actually worked on Sir Edmund Hillary's trip on Everest in 1953. And when Sir Edmund Hillary came back to Nepal to build schools, Basang Tenzing's father actually worked with him pretty closely to build that infrastructure. And I'm always so excited to share with him how proud I am of his son and how many adventures that we've had and everything that we've done and how he's emerging as a leader. And the call to action I'm going to leave you with tonight is the same call to action that he gives me every single time I talk to him. And he's really old and frail now, but through Basang Tenzing translating, he asks me the same thing that I'm going to ask you tonight. After telling him all these amazing stories from our expedition and how proud I am of his son, he says, Luis, that's great. It sounds like you've had a lot of amazing fun in the mountains here. You've done a lot of amazing good, bringing, as he likes to call them, those crazy foreign people to our country. But answer this question for me. How is what you're doing going to make my great-grandchildren's world better? How is what you're doing in the mountains going to make their world more extraordinary? And he's actually learned that word, extraordinary. That's no different to us. That's no different to our kids, the next generation, how we're going to engage in this interaction and how we're going to define this space. So that's the call to action that I'd like to leave you with. And I know we're going to do a little Q&A and hopefully turn the lights back on. So thank you for your time. Let's have some questions.